Mike, welcome back to the show. How did you spend your summer vacation?
Oh, you know me, Keir. Lots of outdoor activities like hiking to the types of mountains, swimming in mountain lakes, the lake mountain places, forging raging rivers in the mountains.
You just spent the last 6 weeks inside watching movies, didn't you?
No. I mean, what did you do with your time off from the show? Didn't you say you're going to turn off all your electronics and go on a vision quest or something?
About that.
Yeah, just what I thought, Keir.
My dermatologist says I should avoid the sun.
Wow. All right. Well, welcome to the Filmographers podcast, where two pale men watch movies, read about them, and then talk about them.
It's also the show where we study a director's entire career, one film at a time. I'm Keir Graff.
And I'm Michael Moreci. In our first season, we're turning the spotlight on Steven Soderbergh, one of Hollywood's most fascinating and versatile directors. We discuss why each of his films succeeded or failed, always looking at them in the context of the Hollywood landscape at the time they were released.
We hope you've been joining us on our journey to watch or rewatch all of Soderbergh's movies, or at least some of them. And we really appreciate your patience while we took some time off to rest, recharge, and, yes, watch movies.
We need a break to watch some movies from all those movies we've been watching.
Oh my God, it's a busman's holiday.
We will be back next week with a brand new episode on Soderbergh's fascinating, if not 100% satisfying, The Girlfriend Experience. But before we get to that, we have a really special episode for you today.
All season long, we've been impressed by Soderbergh's range and versatility. We've enjoyed revisiting old favorites, discovering some new favorites, and just finally watching some of his less-known films for the first time. In the interest of connecting with even more Soderbergh fans, we reached out to some of our friends in the arts and asked them to share their enthusiasm for their favorite Soderbergh films. And the response just blew us away.
Yeah, it really did. I mean, we've got some heavy hitters on today's show. We've got John Green.
And Gillian Flynn.
And Daniel Krause.
And Ben Percy and Rowan Baird and Tim Seeley and wow, just wow. We asked and some super cool people delivered.
Yeah, it's a regular murderer's row. It really is.
To be clear, these people have not murdered anybody, but their tributes to their favorite Soderbergh films do slay.
Some of their favorites are films you might expect, but some of them will totally surprise you. One of these people doesn't even like Soderbergh, but we invite him anyway because he does love one of Soderbergh's movies.
Fair enough. And now, on with the show. Kicking things off, Gillian Flynn shares her love for a film we'll be covering just 2 weeks from now.
Hi, this is Gillian Flynn, and I am here to discuss the most underrated Steven Soderbergh movie ever, The Informant, with an exclamation mark. This movie is extremely funny. It's fast-breaking, clever, satiric, one of my favorite Matt Damon performances ever. Now, you may think a film that's based on a book about price fixing at Arthur Daniels Midland might sound dry, but this is not that film. At first, it's just winking at you here and there. There's this Marvin Hamlish score that's absolutely amazing. It sounds like this mix between a 70s sitcom and a game show. And there's the never-ending voiceover of Matt Damon's helpless, guileless dupe of an informant, his various thoughts as he's being slowly sucked into this larger plan with the FBI. And I know there's one where he's waving goodbye to the FBI guy who's about to use him, and he's on his doorstep and he thinks, I could see us fishing or whatever. What a good listener. My husband and I say this to each other all the time whenever one of us is getting worked by a salesperson, like buying a car or getting some housework done or something. I could see us fishing or whatever, and that's our way of telling the other that they need to be less charmed by this human. But, you know, he'll be at dinner and doing musings on polar bears or neckties, and the whole thing is made even more fun by Soderbergh's usual use of comedians. You'll see Tony Hale and Patton Oswalt and even Andy Daly all show up. And I have to say, as a screenwriter, Soderbergh is working from a genius script by Scott Z. Burns. I cannot imagine how hard that script must have been to break and to come up with its various beats. that keep it moving along in this amazingly funny way. And the very cool thing that's most interesting as we slowly realize that beneath this exec's naive exterior, the person we've been following is actually a complete fabulist. And beneath his corny exterior, he's pulled off a very large crime and, doesn't entirely take it that seriously what he's done. He kind of blames other people for it. I had to do it and not my fault. And what are you going to do? And so the film bounces around from the lies companies tell us to the lies we tell ourselves. And that every single one of us twists the narrative to suit our needs, from the very personal average human to large corporations. And that we are all not entirely responsible for our hero's story that we're trying to sell other people. So it's a blast of fun, but also manages to slide in a very intriguing story. And so I just love it. If you haven't seen it, check it out.
This is Ben Percy, the author of The Ninth Metal and Red Moon, and the writer of Wolverine at Marvel Comics. There's a moment I love in The Seven Samurai, The Magnificent Seven, The Sting, The Dirty Dozen, The Fellowship of the Ring, even Armageddon, when a crew gets assembled for a job. Maybe it's a team trying to win a championship, as is the case with the Mighty Ducks 2. Or maybe it's a bunch of superheroes trying to hunt down a supervillain, as is the case with the Avengers. But the sequence that follows, when the director showcases the skill set of every character, is always a hell of a good time. And Soderbergh does this better than anyone in Ocean's 11, leaning into the pleasure of the recruitment and giving it nearly a half hour of screen time. Every one of these crooks is not only highly skilled, but every one of them has their own individual motivation, and they can only pull off this heist if they're all working together in harmony. The pickpocket, the explosives expert, the auto specialists, the electronics nerd, the old con men, the contortionist. Danny Ocean brings them all together for the impossible task of ripping $150 million out of an impenetrable underground vault. This opening act sets the precedent for the entire film. Crime has never looked so damn cool.
This is Robert Stern, Chicago-based cinematographer. I was asked to do a little bit of a clip for the new Filmographers podcast via this amazing following of Steven Soderbergh that Michael and Keir are doing. And I was asked to present my favorite film by the auteur of auteurs, the filmmaker of filmmakers. Man, that's a hard one. I tend to like, and I'm trying to make this quick. I tend to like the movies that are like in between what directors do that are the hits. Like, I don't love the hits, right? I enjoy the hits. I don't love them. I tend to really love the offbeat stuff that a director does. I feel like it tends to show me like who they really are, and what they're really doing. So just a little bit of a thing. I think like he's definitely a filmmaker hero. He literally breaks all the rules, even the rules of his own guild. The dude's like, as you know, probably via the podcast, he's like going under pseudonyms for being, Peter Andrews as the DP, or Sam Lowry as the writer, or Marianne Bernard as the editor. It's just absolutely hilarious. And I've been kind of following this whole thing since I was a kid, since I was a teenager. So following his work has been incredible. My favorite that I constantly think about all the time is not a movie. It's actually a series that he did called The Nick. 2 seasons of it currently, although Michael teased me recently with there being announced a season 3, which would be incredible. But what he did in The Nick was outstanding. I love period. I love raw period. which I don't know that there's a lot of raw period out there. Some might say like, okay, like, is maybe like a Badlands movie or something like that pretty raw? Yeah, okay. But like the Nick is like straight up, 100 years ago. Here we go, handheld, wide angle shots in a period movie. Do you know what wide angle means? Wide angle means expense. It means risk. It means art department working full time, overnights, days and days and days to make sure that this wide shot is period ready, that the horses look right, the road looks right, that there's no tire tracks on the road, that there's actually wheels and ruts from like wooden wheels and horses and carriages. Like the amount of wide shots that they have, and what seems like not just wides but extreme wides, and then also doing super shallow depth of field and close focus and close-ups that are just not traditional at all, and it'd be a period piece. Incredible work. The saturation of color, the inky blacks, the super bright highlights. Gosh, I love the risk in it. It's just, I would love a chance of doing something like that one day. So I would say, if any piece or project of his that stands out to me the most, it would be the Nick. And that's my take on it. I hope y'all enjoy that. I can't wait to see who's next for y'all to feature with filmographers. And I listen all the time, and I can't wait to see some of these flicks that y'all talk about that I haven't even seen yet.
Hey, this is Daniel Krause. I'm a writer, and I have been asked by Keir and Mike to talk about why I like Steven Soderbergh's Bubble. It's an interesting assignment for me. I'm not a huge Soderbergh fan in general. I mean, I respect the hell out of him. He's a chameleon, obviously, and so few people get away with that. Like, who can make any kind of genre film they want? Very few people. I mean, there's the giants. Scorsese could do anything he wants. I remember Brad Anderson had a period where he tried to be that, where he would go from horror to romantic comedy. It's just really rare, and so I have a lot of respect for Soderbergh. But I think I'm just so into artists who do have a certain thing, and just like do that thing so intensely. But I remember when around the time Bubble came out, I was heavily involved in independent film at that time. I was a filmmaker, a director, a editor, and various other things. And I was doing a lot of research at the time into HD video, which was kind of a brand new thing. This movie Bubble was produced by, I believe, HDNet, which was a new entity at the time, but one that seemed to be really going places. And I read an interview, and I think some sort of HD magazine, that Soderbergh was saying that, and I don't know if he was joking or being serious, but I read it as serious, that he had shot Bubble by going to a small town and just casting from the people who lived in that small town, and that he hoped to continue to do this, to just go to another random small town, cast the people there, and write the story based on sort of what's in the town. And I got really excited about this idea. It was kind of like prestige community theater, And I suppose Bubble is a humble work, but until you think about the fact that these aren't actors, it's a whole different skill set to be able to get random people to act in a drama. Like, imagine the people you work with and somehow whipping them into shape to perform in a drama. I think Bubble is real and sad in a way that I'll always respond to, in a way that like something like Ocean's 11 or even Out of Sight, I'll never get as excited about that kind of artifice in the way I get excited about Bubble. My interests are just weirder than I think most of Soderbergh's film, but of course not all of them. I think my overall non-enthusiasm for Soderbergh is rivaled only by my non-enthusiasm for the Coen brothers. Like, who doesn't love the Coen brothers? The answer is me. I don't know. I can't really account for either of these. But a big exception is Bubble. I really do love it, and this gave me a chance to revisit it, and I still love it.
Hey, this is Tim Seeley. Mike asked me to talk about my favorite Soderbergh movie for his little podcast. So I was happy to do it because I had a really, really fast, easy answer for that. My favorite Soderbergh movie is definitely Out of Sight. I saw it in the theater when it came out in 1998, which, holy crap, I was like 21. That is so long ago. But I saw it with a bunch of friends. It was sort of the early dawn of like my film fandom. That's when I started recognizing more directors, and I think I'd heard good things about Soderbergh. And what I like about that movie, I mean, other than obviously it's an Elmore Leonard story, and it has that Elmore Leonard wit and that Elmore Leonard pacing and that Elmore Leonard sudden jump to violence that he's so good at. But what I love about the movie is just it's got the thing what I later recognized as a Soderbergh trait, which is just it's got this confidence and this like lax sort of approach. It just seems so cool. When I just remember seeing that movie, and just the whole time there doesn't seem to be any sort of effort. Everyone is sort of, they're a personification of an Elmore Leonard character, but they're also in a movie that is just like effortless, which is impressive to see. And I think that's something that he honed maybe to almost too much of a perfection and too much of a style with the Ocean's movies. But here it's on display, and you've got George Clooney, who's also sort of effortlessly cool, but also sort of playing a guy who is at the end of his crime career and is not as cool as he used to be, and is kind of losing whatever interest he had in the crime part because he's enamored with this woman. And there's so many great things. There's Steve Zahn, pulls off a great role in there. And just overall, just the beautiful shots, the pacing. There's a great shot in there where George Clooney is talking to Ving Rhames, and he's so distracted by Karen Sisko that Ving Rhames throws him a soda, and he misses it. It goes out the window. And it's just so well done, and it's so funny. And I feel like that's one of those things that Soderbergh pulls off so well, which I don't think other people does, which is just that effortlessness. Just like everything seems considered, and it's so considered that it looks accidental. That is my favorite Soderbergh movie. Thanks for inviting me to talk about it, Mike. Good luck on all these movies. Good choice. And this is Tim Seeley. I'm out.
Hi, this is Rowan Baird, author of The Divorcees, and given that few things give me more joy in life than a well-executed heist movie, it's probably no surprise that I really love Steven Soderbergh. Ocean's 11 is obviously a classic. I think it's better than the original, and Out of Sight is like pure, sexy 1990s perfection. But my favorite Soderbergh movie is actually Logan Lucky. I'm not going to make the case here that it's his best film. There are real flaws with it. The Southern accents are all over the place. Channing Tatum's love interest, when you first meet her, has an improbably horrible haircut. But it's the movie that I want to watch on a Friday night. I love that it's a heist film set on a NASCAR track, that the heist itself involves painted cockroaches and bags of gummy bears and press-on nails. I always laugh really hard when the prison inmates demand new George R.R. Martin books, but they don't believe the warden when he tells them just how behind schedule the author is. I cry when Channing Tatum's daughter sings Take Me Home Country Roads. This movie, especially in 2017 when it was released, it has the potential to feel really political. Tatum is an ex-coal miner in West Virginia, but even though there's a sharpness to the production, there aren't sharp edges to it. I think it's generous and sincere and fun. And it reminds me why I love Soderbergh. He's a director with a clear style, but he doesn't come off as an auteur. His work is accessible. It's not exactly for everyone, but it's for most of us. And he has such an obvious, often pragmatic love of filmmaking. I looked it up, and in the past 6 years, he's directed 8 films. And yeah, not all of them are great, but as I get older as a writer, I find less inspiration in the artists that are toiling for years over one seminal masterpiece, and more in those that are showing up every day and doing the work. And Soderbergh does the work, and occasionally he makes a great film where everything just seems to click into place, kind of like a perfect heist. May we all be so lucky.
My name is Cameron Burns, and I am a producer and partner at Paper Street Pictures. When I first got the assignment to do a little blurb here about my favorite Steven Soderbergh movie, it got me to thinking, what is my favorite Steven Soderbergh movie? He's one of the few filmmakers that I don't have an answer at the ready for that. which I think speaks to why he's such an interesting filmmaker. Going back and doing a little bit of research, I think Traffic and Out of Sight may be better movies, but my favorite Soderbergh movie is The Limey. First of all, it's a very cool, nuanced version of a revenge movie, and that's always been kind of a subsection of action, drama, horror, a little bit of all of those that I really enjoy. Movies like Hardcore, Straw Dogs, and Death Wish. And I feel like The Limey is kind of the smart man's well-made version of those movies. Not that those movies aren't also well-made, but it's a little more nuanced in a way that some of those necessarily aren't. A lot of this movie hinges on the fact that Terrence Stamp just gives an absolutely transcendent performance as a man coming to America after just getting out of jail to find out what happened to his dead daughter. And he infuses that role with so much regret and so much life that the fact that you're following kind of one guy on this very linear story almost doesn't matter because he just chews the scenery so much. There are also the use of the old Terrence Stamp footage from a 1967 film of his as the flashback footage is so interesting and works so well. And in general, the use of flashback and nonlinear storytelling is done incredibly well here. It tells the audience the exact info they need at the exact time they need it. It allows the movie to dole out the information that it wants kind of whenever and however it wants. And it's a movie that it's not really nonlinear in that the story is kind of straight ahead, but it uses little sub pockets of flashback and nonlinear storytelling just to get things across when needed. And I think it's one of the better examples of using that concept, not to tell a confusing out of order story, but to just dole out information. And I think because of that and because of the great performances across the board, Peter Fonda has not been better for a really long time. This is one of the first movies where Louis Guzman really got something to do and not be kind of a background character. Nicky Katt is great in this. Just a lot of really good, interesting performance. Leslie Ann Warren, probably never better. I love this kind of movie. And I think Soderbergh as a director, his style latched on so well with this kind of movie. You combine his ability to direct with Terrence Stamp's performance and just the very mean-spirited kind of nature of a movie like Hardcore or Straw Dogs or Death Wish, but with kind of the sentimentality of Terrence Stamp's character. And I just think you get a really very interesting, well-made, well-executed film. It's not a movie that I think a lot of people are going to say is their favorite Steven Soderbergh movie, but since the very first time I saw it in 1999, it's always stuck with me and remains my favorite.
Hi, my name is Andrew Corns, and I am the creator and host of the Revisionist Almanac. For those unfamiliar with my show, I am joined by a rotating group of guests on a monthly basis where we pick a year in film, take a deep dive into those movies, then review what won the Oscars in Best Picture, Best Director, and the 4 acting categories before wiping the slate clean, making our own nominations and winner picks, and then turning it over to the online community to vote for what should have won, which eventually gets recognized as the revised category winner. And you can find me on every single social media platform using the handle @RevAlmanac, and the episodes are available on all podcast platforms, including in video format on our YouTube channel. I want to thank Michael for reaching out and offering me the chance to participate in this episode. I think Steven Soderbergh is a fascinating director with a highly varied and eclectic filmography. Even though he's made bigger budget films as his stature in Hollywood grew throughout the 2000s, he never seemed to lose touch with his independent film roots and his ability to be nimble and efficient in his storytelling. When it comes to my personal favorite Soderbergh film, 4 specifically come to mind. Those would be Che, Traffic, Out of Sight, and Ocean's 11. And while I would love to pick Out of Sight for its dynamic and electric chemistry between George Clooney and Jennifer Lopez, to a large degree it feels like the buildup for what he would eventually do just a few years later when putting his own spin on the 1960 film that starred members of the famous Rat Pack. 2001's Ocean's 11 is just about the perfect heist film, one that has been replicated countless times by less talented directors over the last 20 years. The film is under 2 hours. It doesn't waste 1 second of its runtime. It moves at an electric pace, and it features one of my favorite ensemble casts in recent memory. You can just sense how much fun and playfulness was happening on set because it translates into the final product. Clooney, Brad Pitt, Julia Roberts, Matt Damon, Elliot Gould, Carl Reiner, just to name a few, a who's who of actors from multiple generations in Hollywood history. The film is total comfort food for me, something that I can turn on at any point in the movie and just have a great time with. And I'm not sure how many others Michael has asked to contribute to on this project, but I will be very surprised if I'm the only person that names Ocean's 11 as my personal favorite film from the director. And I can't wait to hear what everyone else picks from the Soderbergh catalog once the episode goes up. So thank you again to Michael and the filmographers. This was a real treat. And this is Andrew at the Revisionist Almanac, signing off.
My name is Sean Talley. I'm a filmmaker, a partner and producer with Paper Street Pictures. My favorite Soderbergh is one I share with Michael and many others, and that is the smart, the slick, the stylish 1998 film Out of Sight. I know the guys mentioned a part of Roger Ebert's review on the Filmographers episode on Out of Sight, where Roger stated that this film was the first in the wake of Pulp Fiction to not just ape the style and vibe, but to build upon it. And like the host, I don't know if that's an entirely fair assessment, but Tarantino's film did make such a dent that you could argue that they wouldn't have necessarily greenlit, much less thrown the budgets that they did at a number of crime thriller type scripts in Pulp's wake, many of which also had the fractured timelines, no less. That said, I did agree with Ebert's take that it is, quote, a crime movie less interested in crime than in how people talk and flirt and lie and get themselves into trouble. It's a movie that just feels effortlessly cool, thanks in part to Elmore Leonard's colorful dialogue, the many colorful characters who very often feel like they exist in this world, not just existing in service of the plot. And this, very good director knowing when to let tender moments or silly asides breathe and when not to. But yeah, Soderbergh, he really made a lasting impression on me with this picture and earned the benefit of the doubt with me that remains to this day. I liken him to directors such as Danny Boyle and Richard Linklater, who I also love dearly. Gentlemen who will definitely have a strikeout here and there. There's no doubt about it. They've had some misses, but I always appreciate that they are always taking swings. Like they don't take on a film because they want to play it safe, or they don't take on a film for just a paycheck. And I'll say Mr. Soderbergh pulled off a few pretty decent feats in this picture. He made a certain leading lady incredibly likable, which I will also credit George Clooney with a good bit as well. The chemistry between his Jack Foley and Lopez's Karen Sisco is off the charts. I mean, Bogart and Bacall level, And two, he assembled one of the most killer supporting casts of the 1990s with this film. A deep bench of talent that includes Don Cheadle, Ving Rhames, Steve Zahn, Albert Brooks, Catherine Keener, Luis Guzman, Dennis Farina, and Michael Keaton, reprising his Jackie Brown role as Ray Nicolette, as sort of kickstarting the on-screen Elmore verse, or whatever you want to call it, that has continued into Justified. But yeah, this is practically a comfort movie for me. It's one that I can still find a new small detail in every time I revisit it. I love this film. I still quote this film. And more than any other line, strangely enough, might be Cheadle's "might fall on something hard like a shiv," or you guys know the rest. But I digress. I would also love to go a little deeper here, but the host told me to keep this just a few minutes, so I'm trying to do so. And besides, they did a great job dissecting this flick on the episode dedicated to Out of Sight, so go listen to that one if you haven't. But yes, thank you for having me. Great show, Mike and Keir. Keep up the good work, gents.
Hello, this is John Green. It's really hard to pick a favorite Steven Soderbergh film for me. There are so many great candidates, but I think my favorite of the moment, and this is absolutely a reflection of historical circumstance, is Contagion, because it just captures so much of the titillating horror of a medical catastrophe unfolding. And of course, we then had a medical catastrophe unfold, and watching the film in the context of what happened was especially fascinating and moving for me. But also I watched the movie before COVID, and it was still sort of horrifying and wonderful. I think there's something about the scope of it, the way it's able to zoom way in and zoom way out, that helps you to understand what the actual feeling of being inside of a kind of society-wide catastrophe feels like, how the collapse of systems unfolding really shapes the lives of individuals, but also has this sort of societal impact. There's something about that really resonates with me, but also it's just, it's fascinating to watch someone imagine what a disease might be like, obviously COVID is very different from the illness portrayed in Contagion. It's far less fatal, but you see how quickly society can really shut down in the face of such a threat. I think about it a lot in the context of the Black Plague, which killed 50% of all people living in Northern Africa, Europe, and Asia during about a 10-year period. That kind of terror is unimaginable and was unimaginable to me. It's certainly less unimaginable than it used to be, but something about Contagion captured that, and yet at the same time kept it human, kept the stories human and hopeful. So I think that's my favorite Steven Soderbergh movie of the moment, but that's subject to change. Like if, for instance, I get to see an Ocean's 11 style heist up close at some point in the next 5 years, maybe that will become my favorite Soderbergh movie. But for now, it's Contagion, because I got to see a Contagion-like experience up close, and I didn't like it, but I do think that Contagion has, in some ways, given me some kind of form or structure for imagining how it went, and for understanding how it went, and also imagining how it might have gone.
Man, I love these clips so much. I love John's take on Contagion, which is a film, we're about to do our episode on that, and it's a film we've been thinking about and talking about quite a bit, and it's such a great, fascinating film. I love his take on it completely, and I also love what John said to me in an email when we were discussing his contribution. He said Dan Krause doing Bubble is about as on brand as John choosing Contagion, which, if you know these folks, is right on the money.
Yes, definitely. Our good friend Dan is staying on brand, which I love. And I loved that Logan Lucky made an appearance. Rowan had a great take on it. It's a movie that, I'll be frank, that I always wrestle with, that is it my favorite or is Out of Sight my favorite? I love, and I can't wait to get to it. We haven't touched on that yet, but Logan Lucky is a movie that I adore. I think it's Daniel Craig's best performance ever. It's so good, so it was cool to hear that get picked out. I really appreciated that.
I was really fascinated to see what everybody picked. I mean, certainly it makes sense that we're going to get Out of Sight in this, and we had to, and understandably, it's many people consider it to be Soderbergh's best. Naturally, we got some love for Ocean's 11, and I'm so glad we got that too. The Limey, which has always been kind of my personal favorite. I thought Cameron had a nice take on that. And your pal Robert picking The Nick, that was kind of an interesting take.
Yeah, I really, really thought that was cool. I mean, I love The Nick, and I want us to find a way to touch on that, because I think it's a brilliant show. I think that the performances in it are just absolutely exceptional. It's just such a well done, well made show. It came at such an interesting time of Soderbergh's career, where he, had retired. Chris Sullivan is the guy that I know, so I'm a little bit, I have a relationship there. But his performance is one of the best Soderbergh moments, and anybody who knows The Nick knows the line where, what. Excuse me, explicit, but what fucking dignity, it's such a great moment, such a great episode, and there's some tremendous highs. So I'm glad that we got that mention for sure.
I don't know how we're going to find time, but we're going to have to find time to do a Patreon exclusive on The Nick. We'll do it. Yeah. Speaking of Patreon, listeners, if you enjoyed today's episode, please support us by joining our Patreon at any level, free or $6 a month or something in between. We'd love to have your support.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you to the people who do. Thank you for our listeners. And thank you all the contributors who were so gracious to give us their time, give us their energy, give us their thoughts. It was really cool. I had a blast with this, and I know Keir shares my gratitude. Thank you all for doing this. It really made a pretty special and unique episode that I'm very glad we did.
Yes, absolutely. You may think it's only a 3-minute audio, but these are busy people, and for us to impose on them like that and for them to deliver, we're so appreciative.
And we'll give you back your families now.
All hostages will be released. Listeners, we want to hear your tributes to your favorite Steven Soderbergh films, and we'd love to share them on future episodes of the Filmographers podcast. So, don't worry if you're talking about a movie we've already covered. It's your take that's important. So if you listened to this show today and you were inspired and you thought I'd like to weigh in with a different take on a movie we already talked about, or one that we haven't covered, please, by all means, contribute.
Yeah, I mean, just record an audio clip that's 2 minutes or shorter, somewhere in that ballpark, and email it to us at thefilmographerspodcast@gmail.com. We'll air it. We'll put it on the air. Just be sure to introduce yourself at the start, give us the name of the film, and tell us why you think it's great.
Yeah, and don't delay. Record it now while you're thinking about it. As always, you can connect with us not just via email, but also on Instagram at The Filmographers, on X at FilmographerPod, and on Letterboxd at Filmographers. And if you enjoy our podcast, please show your support. I just said it a minute ago. I'm going to say it again now. Join our Patreon, patreon.com, The Filmographers Podcast, at any level. If you throw us a few bones, we'll throw you some great subscriber-only stuff.
And thank you, as always, to Kevin Lau, our producer, Gompson, who composed and played our theme music, and Cosmo Graff, who designed our logo.
Join us next week on the Filmographers Podcast when we'll discuss The Girlfriend Experience, Soderbergh's exploration of the world of high-priced escorts. Soderbergh being Soderbergh, he's more interested in the technology than the sex.